Good morning. Welcome to Houston Oasis. We're glad everyone's here. We've got some visitors this morning. Thank you for joining us. We are a community grounded in reason, celebrating the human experience. It's an exciting time for us to be together, supporting each other, coming together, building something exciting and new. On the website, you will see a list of, I believe, 5 or 6 kind of core statements. And the one that always jumped out at me that I like, that I'll highlight this morning, is human hands solving human problems. And that's something that really appeals to me. And part of being a community is human hands helping each other. And that's something that we're building here and that's coming together. It's very exciting. So we welcome everybody here. We're glad that you're here. This morning, for our musical entertainment, we have Sweet Mama Cotton. So let's welcome her.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, you might have surmised that I'm a blues artist, and that's true. I play a lot of other kinds of music too, but today I decided to at least do mostly my own music. And the first song I'm going to do is a song I wrote for my first CD, and it was inspired by an article I read about Rip Torn. So you all might know the actor Rip Torn. And if you know him, you know that his career has kind of gone up and down and up and down and up and down. And so they asked his friends about that, and his friends said, yeah, sometimes he's in the pits, but his attitude is always really, really positive. And so when they interviewed Rip Torn, they said, well, why is it that even when your career is going down and you're having a hard time, why is it that you can keep such a good attitude toward everything? And he said, every time my career goes down, I just say to myself, I'm having a good time, having a bad time. And I said, oh, there's a song right there. So I created a song about that idea. I don't have a dollar to call my own. No way to cover the bills on my home. The blues is my only friend to the bone. But I'm alright, I'll be alright. I'm having a good time, having a bad time, on my own. Yes, I am. There once was a time friend. I just couldn't make it without a good man. Well, a good man is fine, but a bad one messed up my plan. When things got rough, he just packed up and ran. But I'm alright, I'll be alright. I'm having a good time, having a bad time, on my own. Yes, I am. When days grow long, I might feel sad, remembering the love we had. Perhaps one day, before I'm old, I'll find a love that won't grow cold. But until I do, I won't sit and cry. I'll live my life before I die. And I'm alright, I'll be alright. I'm having a good time, having a bad time, on my own. Yes, I am. Till days go long, I might feel sad, remembering the love we had. Perhaps someday, before I'm old, I'll find a love that won't grow cold. but until I do, I won't sit and cry. I'll live my life before I die, and I'm alright. I'll be alright. I'm having a good time, having a bad time, on my own. Yes, I am. I'm having a good time, having a bad time, on my own. Yes, I am. Thank you. Thank you. So that was on my first CD, and my first CD is called Expect Delays. And there was a reason why we called it Expect Delays, because it just took so long to finish. But while we were in the midst of it, and after we named the CD, my partner at that time, my friend and guitar player Walter, he said, we should really have a title song for this CD called Expect Delays. He said, you should write a song called Expect Delays. And I started thinking about that, and I finally did write this song called Expect Delays, and it turned out to be pretty much the story of my life and also about living in Houston. So here it is, Expect Delays. Cruising the highway, trying to make my way home, running on coffee and driving the road all alone, minding my business, thinking of things left to do, never expecting what I run into. The sign pointed left, but I wanted right. No way to avoid what's ahead. The cars are stacked up at the traffic light. The light is on permanent red. Expect delays, with gratification postponed for another day. Expect delays, but don't give up your dream till they carry you away. I'm sitting at Hobby, I'm ready to fly off to Jamaica, blue sea and blue sky, thinking of romance and tropical nights, dreaming of beaches and Caribbean delights. I picked up my bags and I stood in line, thinking of Montego Bay. Then I looked up and I saw the sign, we won't make Jamaica today. Expect delays, with gratification postponed for another day. Expect delays, but don't give up your dream till they carry you away. Well, I've been a dreamer since I was a child, planning to turn on the world with my style. Fortune by 20, true love by 24, all of the pleasure I had been waiting for. But time makes sweet changes in everything. The power is out of my hands. We play with the cards circumstances bring. We learn to adjust all our plans and expect delays, with gratification postponed for another day. Expect delays, but don't give up your dream till they carry you away. And expect delays, with gratification postponed for another day. Expect delays, but don't give up your dream till they carry you away. Yeah, don't give up now, Because you know, if you give up today, it could all come true tomorrow, and then where would you be? So just hang in there, but expect delays. I think it's time for Mike.
Thank you so much. I knew Marcy was special when I found out that she went to the University of Michigan. This is when we do our community moment, and I'm going to invite, this week, Vic Wang is going to do it. So let's welcome Vic.
Thanks, Mike. All right. So, unlike our previous members who have shared their community moments with us these past few weeks, I didn't come from a religious background or a religious family. I never had any kind of organized religion growing up, which is not to say that I was raised as an atheist per se, but rather while growing up, religion was just never really an issue in my family. My parents just never really talked about it. And instead, they allowed me to make my own decisions about what to believe, which naturally, in retrospect, I'm extremely thankful for. But with that being the case, I thought I'd go for a slightly different approach this time and share with you something I've been thinking about lately, which is how we as freethinkers, secularists, atheists, and humanists tend to sell ourselves short, so to speak, when we speak about ourselves and our beliefs, or lack thereof. Often in ways that we may not even realize. For example, I'll often hear people say that non-religious people can be moral too, or you don't need religion to be a good person, which of course is absolutely true. But saying we can be moral implies that as a general rule, we're not. And saying that you don't need religion still suggests that religion might make us better people than we already are. Yet the truth is that when compared to the religious, freethinkers are statistically more moral than virtually any other demographic group. In the United States, on a per capita basis, we commit less crime, have lower rates of divorce, have lower incidence of teen pregnancy, higher levels of education, and the same holds true when you break it down worldwide. The nations in the world with the lowest religiosity actually have the least crime, the lowest corruption, and the highest standards of living in the world. By virtually any objective metric you can think of, freethinkers are statistically more moral than the religious, not less. And all without any fear of infinite torment in the afterlife and no expectation of any metaphysical rewards for simply being the best person we can be. Another thing I'll often hear when it comes to religious claims or religion in general is that it doesn't make sense. And it's true, there are countless religious claims which don't make sense and can never make sense. But I've always felt that saying something doesn't make sense sounds a little too close to I don't understand it. It's the kind of thing someone might say when trying to understand advanced calculus, not just things which are inherently nonsensical. But as is probably the case for most, if not all, the people in this room right now, we're probably here at Houston Oasis because we do understand traditional religion, and we speak from a position of having too much information on the subject, not too little. So that's why I find myself catching myself, and instead of saying that the concept of the Trinity, for example, doesn't make sense, which it doesn't, I say it's incoherent. Instead of saying that the concept of an infinitely loving God punishing people with infinite torment for finite sins doesn't make sense, I say that it's paradoxical, not to mention immoral. To me, that sends a much stronger message, that the issue isn't with us, it's with metaphysical claims that directly contradict what we know to be true about the reality we live in. And finally, I also often hear people referring to themselves as having lost their faith after they've left religion behind. But think about this for a second. What else is there that we refer to as a loss that isn't something we'd like to have back? Would we ever, if you ask someone how they've been lately, would they ever say, I had a really bad cold, but I lost it a few days ago? Would someone ever say they used to have a smoking habit, but they lost it? Of course not. People lose money, they lose car keys, they lose sanity. But as freethinkers, we didn't lose religious faith. Instead, we gained reason. We gained a richer, fuller understanding of reality. And that's something I would encourage all of us to be proud of.
Thanks for sharing those thoughts, Vic. This is the point where we just get out, stretch your legs, refill your coffee, and meet and greet your neighbor, make a few new friends. Also, before we do that, I don't normally like to point out people and embarrass them, but there's a good person for you to meet. Today is, I'm sorry, TC, but you put it, no, well, always meet Fred Thompson, but TC Smythe, you would raise your hand because TC has volunteered to be the kind of the musical booking agent. She's the one responsible for lining up all the marvelous musicians we've been having. This is her first Sunday to actually get here, and she also said she'd like some feedback on how the music thing is going. So definitely a special greeting to her. But good to see all of you. Let's get up, stretch your legs, and make a few new friends. Fred Thompson approached me this morning. He said he had a reading for Columbus Day and a thought. So I'm going to bring him up. I thought it was a great idea, and it kind of meshes with our message this morning. So
tomorrow is Columbus Day. Columbus is one of two individuals who we celebrate by federal holidays. There used to be three, but George Washington got demoted when we now celebrate President's Day instead of Washington's birthday. The only remaining individual, ironically, is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. History books glorify Columbus as a brave and pious hero who discovered the New World and made it possible for us to have all the wonderful things we have in America today. But history books don't always accurately portray history. I want to read some selected quotes from the chapter on Christopher Columbus from a book entitled Lies My Teacher Told Me. Everything your American history textbook got wrong. This is going to feel like Columbus bashing, and it is, but it's about something more important than that. It's about human nature, and the underlying theme, of course, is about the way history books distort reality. And I intend to close with an object lesson from history that applies to us middle-class people right here at Oasis Houston in 2012. I'll start with a few quotes. They will seem a little fragmented because I can't read the entire book to you. To make a good myth, our textbooks find space for many humanizing particulars. Most of them tell us that Columbus's first act after going ashore was thanking God for leading them safely across the sea, even though the surviving summary of Columbus's own journal states that, before them all, he took possession of the island, as in fact he did for the king and queen. Many of the textbooks tell of Columbus's 3 later voyages to America, but most do not find space to tell us how Columbus treated the lands and the people he discovered. Christopher Columbus introduced 2 phenomena that revolutionized race relations and transformed the modern world. The taking of land, wealth, and labor from indigenous peoples in the Western Hemisphere, leading to their near extermination, and the transatlantic slave trade, which created a racial underclass that we still have in the United States today. Most textbooks are not about teaching the history of Columbus. Their enterprise seems to be building character. They therefore treat Columbus as an origin myth. In other words, he was a good person, and so are we. In 1989, President George H.W. Bush invoked Columbus as a role model for our nation. He said, Christopher Columbus not only opened a door to the New World, but also set an example for us by showing what monumental feats can be accomplished through perseverance and faith in God. There were no white people in Europe before 1492. With the transatlantic slave trade, first Indian, then African, Europeans increasingly saw white as a race and race as an important human characteristic. Columbus's own writings reflect this increasing racism. When Columbus was selling Queen Isabella on the wonders of the Americans, the Indians were described as well-built and quick of intelligence. Later, when Columbus was justifying his wars and the enslavement of the natives that became cruel and stupid, a people warlike and numerous whose customs and religion are very different from ours. And now, if you remember nothing else, remember this paragraph, which I'm going to read you. It is always useful to think badly about people one has exploited or plans to exploit. Modifying one's opinion to bring them into line with one's actions or planned actions is the most common outcome of a process known as cognitive dissonance. No one likes to think of himself or herself as a bad person. To treat another person badly creates a tension between act and attitude that demands resolution in our own minds. We cannot erase what we have done, and to alter our future behavior may not be in our own best interest. To change our attitude is easier. Columbus gives us the first recorded example of cognitive dissonance in the Americas. For although the natives did change from hospitable to angry, they could hardly have evolved from intelligent to stupid in 3 short years. Evolution doesn't work that way. The change had to be in Columbus's mind. Okay, so let's set the book aside for an example for a second. So far I've been reading to you about somebody in history who was simply a product of his time and the attitudes of his time. But what about us? We don't exploit indigenous peoples. I haven't done it since I retired from BP 13 years ago. I was human resources manager for Africa and Middle East operations, and yes, I did exploit indigenous species. But we don't do that. Okay, let me give you a hypothetical example. The deck behind my house needs repairs. Some rotten boards need to be replaced, and somebody has to crawl under it in that 18-inch space where there are spiders and other things too horrible to mention, and pull along some 60-pound concrete piers, set them in place, and all that sort of stuff. And they have to use an electric saw, and my wife knows that I am a certified OSHA hazard with any electric tool in my hand. And so she says, hey, when you go to Home Depot, say, oh, also it's going to take me 2 full days, and I'll miss Houston Oasis. And she tells me, hey, when you go to Home Depot to get the supplies, just hire a couple of Mexicans. They'll work for $50 a day. And so I go and I get the supplies and I pull up in my truck where there are about 40 or 50 brown-skinned men who look kind of hungry. And I talk to Rodriguez and Lopez and Sanchez, who incidentally happen to be descendants of the people Columbus exploited. And yeah, they will do it for $50 a day. What a deal. So I bring them home and they do the work. $50 a day. That's $250 a week, that's $1,000 a month, that's $12,000 a year if they worked all day. You can't live on $12,000 a year in Houston, Texas. So the question I leave you with, how much would you pay Lopez and Sanchez to work for you for a day? And I'm going to close with a quote. In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. In 1493, Columbus stole all that he could see.
Thank you, Fred. Lots to think about there. It's kind of an interesting segue to my talk this morning, if I can find my notes. There may be no talk. Oh, here we go. I'm going to start with kind of a political story as well. But I'm not getting political, okay? So I'm not trying to start political fights or anything like that. But this is just a story that really happened to me in the last midterm election just a couple of years ago. And you remember that was the night that the House of Representatives changed control from Democratic to Republican. I was at a sports bar, and when they had election coverage on the big screen, and when they announced that the Republicans had taken control, the table next to me cheered. And so I just turned and I thought rather mildly just said, and why do you think this is good for our country? That's all I asked. And without missing a beat, a guy at that table shot back at me, because we are that much closer to getting rid of that N-word president. And it just escalated from there. Because I don't care what your politics are, that's beyond the pale. And it led to an argument about the Iraq War, And the consensus at the other table was that Saddam Hussein had attacked the United States on 9/11, and that justified the deaths of hundreds of thousands of Iraqi civilians. And I'm not, those of you who know me, like, I'm not like a fighting kind of guy, but that was the closest I ever got to getting in a fist fight. And it really bothered me that I got that way, because I could feel it when he said that much closer getting, you know, I could just feel the anger instantaneously, like in a fraction of a second, overtaking my system. And like I said, I'm not usually confrontational at all. And I hear similar politics often at Starbucks in the morning with the morning Starbucks crowd in my neighborhood. And I don't say anything. I just sit there and I'm just trying to be the quiet neighbor. So it's kind of bothered me, is that why did I get all, like, almost out of control that night? Was it the time of day? Was it frustration for all those conversations at Starbucks where I never responded? Was it the fact that I had a couple beers? You know, I don't know. But the conclusion I eventually came to was that it was a momentary case of ODD, oxytocin deficiency disorder. And this is, we're kind of picking up where we left off last week, so if you weren't here, don't worry about it. I put everything you need to know about last week up there on the board. We talked about oxytocin as the essential hormone that our brains produce that make us feel calm and empathy and trust. All those experiences of calm and empathy and trust are made possible by the uptake of oxytocin, which then releases serotonin and dopamine. Serotonin, huge mood uplifter. Dopamine is the reward neurotransmitter in your brain. So oxytocin, when it's released, allows us to feel empathy. People who have impaired oxytocin receptors do not feel human empathy at all. They can fake it, but they don't really feel it. And then empathy produces moral behavior, makes me kindly disposed to my neighbor to want to do things for him or her, which then produces trust, and the experience of trust releases more oxytocin. And this is why the brain scientists call this the virtuous cycle. Now, so why aren't we virtuous all the time? Because in the course of daily living, stuff happens that impairs the intake of uptake of oxytocin. Fatigue can do it, stress can do it, genetic anomalies are big culprits, and there's another big factor that I'm going to get to in a minute. So just picking up from last week, I want to consider this week, how do we become more empathetic people, which in turn makes us more, other people more empathetic and expands the virtuous cycle and makes the world a better place. And I want to start with something that happened to me in 9th grade. In 9th grade, we had just moved to Ohio outside Cincinnati, and some friends of mine and I went to an amusement park called Kings Island. If you'll remember, Kings Island is the amusement park made famous in the Brady Bunch episode when Marcia and the gang accidentally switched the tube containing Mike's architectural documents with a poster containing a cartoon character. Do you remember it? But I digress. Anyway, it was a classic Brady Bunch episode. Anyway, that's where it happened. And then we were at Kings Island all day long, big theme park. And at the end of the night, my friend Bill Humphrey's mom, Mrs. Humphrey, came to pick us up. Mrs. Humphrey she was a real character. She was a sweet, kind woman, short Italian lady, smoked 2.5 packs of unfiltered Pall Malls a day. I mean, she smoked, and she was just, because everybody smoked back then. And Mrs. Humphrey came and picked us up, and it was like, the big mob scene when you're leaving the theme park at the end of the day, a bazillion vehicles, and traffic snarl, and we were at an intersection there, leaving the park, and there was a traffic cop directing things, and Mrs. Humphrey was at the front of the line, and she misunderstood, I think, the signals from the traffic cop, and she went when it wasn't her turn to go, and he went ballistic. And we had the windows rolled down. We didn't have AC going, so we could hear. And he screamed at her, "What is wrong with you, lady? Are you blind?" And he threw a few obscenities in. I mean, he just let loose. And it's just one of those small things in life. But I'll never forget how Mrs. Humphrey responded. She just kind of chuckled to herself, and she said, "Oh my, that poor man must have problems." Like that. And I've never forgotten that. She wasn't trying to suppress an angry response and come up with this fake, warm, compassionate response. It's just who she was. She really felt that way. She naturally and spontaneously responded in a way very different from the way I responded in the sports bar. So what was the difference? Well, the big difference is that Mrs. Humphrey is a woman and I'm a guy. And this is the other big factor that impairs oxytocin uptake, which is testosterone. That's it. Testosterone explains a lot. Guys obviously have a lot more of this hormone than women do, but you guys have some. Girls have some. And testosterone came in handy in our ancestral environment when we had, because in order to kill furry little animals to eat, it helps to have your empathy not be so empathetic, you know, and it helps when you have to repel invaders who are trying to take your food. So testosterone came in handy. I guess it comes in handy today when you're trying to sack the quarterback. And testosterone levels are 2 times higher in younger men than they are in older men. The overwhelming majority of violent crimes in this country committed by males between the ages of 20 and 25. Each year, the Darwin Awards, have you heard of those? Given to, and this is the official thing, individuals who ensure the long-term survival of the species by removing themselves from the gene pool in a sublimely idiotic fashion. It almost always goes to a man. Here's some recent honorees. The man who squashed himself under a Coke machine after tipping it forward to get a free can. 3 men who competed over who could stomp hardest on an anti-tank mine. And the would-be pilot who tied weather balloons to his lawn chair shot 2 miles into the air and drifted out to sea. But he only earned an honorable mention because he was rescued by a helicopter. And to show you how nuts testosterone is, I have to admit that there's a small part of me that thinks tying weather balloons to a lawn chair is a really cool idea. How many guys will they do that? So I've been, women on the other hand, because of the testosterone differential, tend to be more empathetic, more other-focused, more generous and charitable than men. They're also less judgmental. While men are more punishing and more ruthless. So I've been eternally grateful for the example of Mrs. Humphrey and her response to the guy. And she probably never thought anything of it. You were just, how when you're a kid you observe so many things you see adults do and they leave lasting lessons. And her example, there have been times, not always, when it's gotten me to stop and breathe and think, okay, this person that I'm upset about is dealing with stuff I have no idea of. So don't be so judgmental. Be a little more understanding. Stephen Covey, remember him, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People guy? He tells a story, and it's been a story that's been used a lot. You've probably heard it, about a time when he was early on a Sunday morning riding a subway in New York City, and people were kind of drowsy and very quiet on the subway, and there was one guy who had a bunch of very young children with him that were completely out of control, rowdy. He couldn't handle them, and he was just sitting there like in his zone. And people were squirming in their seats and shooting him glances like, can't you control your kids? And finally Stephen Covey said, I felt like it was, I just had to get up and say something. So I went over him and I said, sir, can you really do something? You need to control your children a little bit better. They're becoming a distraction for everybody. And the man just looked at him blankly and said, yeah, I know. I should do something, but we just left the hospital where their mother died last night, and I just don't know what to do. And that story is, that might be a bit extreme, but I'm convinced that we encounter things like that on a small level every single day. We don't know what's going on with that other person. As a driver, I loved the traffic song. That was wonderful. I was thinking about this, from the message today. In Houston, when you are the person at the head of the left turn lane, the protected arrow, and there's a long line of people behind you, you have a special responsibility to move the minute the arrow, you get the green arrow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, and then that person doesn't move. And you're like, move! And then they move and it turns red again, and you're stuck for at least 2 more cycles at the light. And because of Covey's story, I now try to remind myself. See, the thing is, it doesn't come natural like Mrs. Humphrey did. I guess it's my testosterone, but I can stop and say, okay, think. You know, that person, they're distracted for a reason. Maybe they just got bad news, they had a hard day at work, they're thinking about stuff at home, problems with the kids, you name it. There are 1,000 things that could be going on. Oh, and the other thing too, and I don't have time to get in this today, but you know how it seems like that happens all the time? And it doesn't, because our brains are wired for negativity on a lot of levels. And so a lot of the slow people, well, I'm going to leave them alone. Okay. So, you know, when you know, just stop for a moment and consider all the factors impacting our mood at any given moment. I mean, we could start brainstorming. You know, amount of sleep, blood sugar levels, what you had or didn't have for breakfast, stress hormones, you know, yeah, amount of sunlight we've been exposed to recently. All of us are walking neurochemical laboratories in a constant state of flux. And the fact that all of us are sitting here relatively placidly today, and like actually our brains are kind of connecting with each other, it's almost miraculous. Given like some people had 2 hours sleep, some people had the big breakfast at Denny's or the Grand Slam or whatever, you know. But yet we're here, and it's just amazing to me. And that we're dealing with that with every human we meet all day long, and they're dealing with us. So I just think we need to be easier on each other, recognizing all the factors that are at work all the time. And I think you add to the fact that we're living in a world that nature didn't prepare us to live in. One of the reasons anthropologists are so interested in studying hunter-gatherer tribes in remote regions around the world is because it's surmised that this is kind of a glimpse into how our ancestors lived maybe 10,000 years ago or so. And one remarkable fact of life for almost all the hunter-gatherer tribes around the world is that they can generally provide for their daily needs with about 1 to 2 hours of work a day. And all the anthropologists remark on how much time they spend socializing, just sitting around, telling stories, gossiping, telling jokes. You know, it seems like in our ancestral past, we spent a large amount of time every day just hanging out together. That's what it seems like we were made for. If you go to Western Europe, don't they seem to do a better job of that than we do? If you go to the, you know, see the big streets in Berlin or Rome or Paris, and you see cafes and people just sitting around for hours and hours drinking their coffee and just talking and having long meals. You know, I don't think we evolved to spend 8 to 10 hours a day working. We didn't. We evolved to spend 2 hours a day working and the rest of it talking and napping and, you know. So the good news this morning is that we're not completely at the mercy of our hormones. First of all, well, I think there are steps we can do to increase our capacity for empathy and compassion, there are demonstrable things we can do to increase our oxytocin uptake. Pets are good. Having dogs and cats, we know, increases oxytocin. But even Hitler had dogs, so it's clearly not enough. Hugs are big producers of oxytocin, huge. So much so that there we go, starting already. So much so that one nationally known brain scientist, who is nicknamed Dr. Hug, says that 8 hugs a day is kind of the recipe, but spread throughout the day. Because when you have a hug, it increases oxytocin boost, and the oxytocin boost lasts for a few hours, and then you get another hug and it lasts for a few hours. 8 hugs throughout the day. I think it's a great idea. Sticking around to eat lunch with friends from Houston Oasis. Communal meals. huge. I mean, in a way, that's becoming our, for lack of a better word, communion. Sticking around, having a communal meal together. Today it's going to be at Phoenicia Deli, 12151 Westheimer. Go up here, hang a left on Westheimer and Kirkwoodish. And so, I really do think that we as a species are making progress toward being more empathetic, less judgmental, more accepting. Steven Pinker talked about it recently, the Harvard psychologist in his book, The Better Angels of Our Nature, where he convincingly documents the decline in violence and cruelty among humans over recent centuries. I think the virtuous cycle actually is working. It's not always onward and upward. We backslide, but it's there. And there's things that we can do to increase it. I'm going to close with a story that caught my eye in an ABC News item just a couple months ago. This was across the ABC news feed on their website. And this is another story about how we never really know what's going on with someone else, sometimes not even with ourselves. A Colorado man was admitted to the hospital for a kidney stone and got some surprising news when the nurse came back with ultrasound results revealing that he had internal female organs. He was actually a woman. The man named Steve Creselius, who's a photographer in Denver, said that he had been dealing with suppressing feminine feelings his entire life. When he was younger, as a child, he remembered liking to play, wear his mom's apron, wanting to play with dolls, and people tried to suppress that in him. He got teased constantly for running like a girl, and he said finally knowing the reason for this was so liberating. But here is the best part. This is why the story caught my eye. It was the response of his family. His wife of 25 years and his children, who accepted his new identity immediately. And every one of them said, "We don't care one way or the other. We love you for who you are. You are still my dad." A few weeks ago when Donald did his community moment, I think you challenged us, Donald, to say, what kind of world do you want to live in? Which is a powerful question. And then work to make that kind of world. And I think you probably agree, that's the kind of world I want to live in, where people accept each other and love each other without condition, without constraint. And we just, let the oxytocin flow. Thanks for letting me chat with you this morning.
And so I'd like to do another song that I wrote, and this song is my most recent song. And I was in my room meditating a few weeks ago, and the sun just poured through my window, and I had to write a song about it. So here's my newest song. I hope you like it. sun. At the start of the day, I close my eyes and I smile. I let it take me away. When I don't know where to run, I turn my face to the sun. I turn my face to the sun. I turn my face to the sun. Sitting here in limbo, waiting for the dice to roll. I am sitting here in limbo. Had some time to search my soul. Meanwhile, they're putting up resistance, but I know that my faith will lead me on. I don't know where life will lead me, but I know where I've been. I can't say what life will show me, but I know what I've seen. Tried my hand at love and friendship, but all that is past and gone. This little girl is moving on. Sitting here in limbo, waiting for the tide to flow. I'm sitting here in limbo, knowing that I have to go. Meanwhile, they're putting up resistance, but I know that my faith will lead me on. Sitting in limbo, sitting in limbo, sitting in limbo, 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 sitting in limbo. You know I got to go. I got to go. Sitting in limbo, sitting in limbo. Limbo, limbo, limbo. Limbo, limbo, limbo. Limbo, limbo, limbo. Limbo, limbo, limbo. Sitting in limbo. Voter registration starts now.